Police investigating the death of a prominent business executive say they are close to wrapping up this case.
Diane McIver was killed inside of a car on the way to her home just last weekend. And Fox 5's Morris Diggs is live at the Zone 2 police precinct in Buckhead. Morris, at this point, detectives have more questions than answers about the case.
Well, yes, they do, but they're telling me that they're calling this a death investigation, which is nearing completion. Now, 64-year-old Diane McIver was killed on Monday morning. The executive for a marketing company, her picture displayed on property of her former firm. Now, late on Sunday, she was a passenger in a car which had pulled off the interstate at Edgewood due to construction. The car with two others proceeded on surface streets headed to Buckhead when a gun that was in the vehicle discharged, according to Atlanta police. The gun fired as the occupants were alongside Piedmont Park on Piedmont Road. Ms. McIver was rushed to the hospital, the Emory facility. That is where police took an initial statement and also found the car in the hospital parking lot. Now, Diane McIver was married to CLAUD McIver, a local attorney.
County Medical Examiner's office is listing the shooting death of a prominent Atlanta executive now as homicide, even as the investigation into her death continues.
Diane McIver died early Monday morning after police say she was shot while riding in an SUV through Midtown. APD not saying much about this case, only that it remains under investigation. Only Channel 2 Action News was there Wednesday afternoon as prominent Atlanta attorney CLAUD Tex McIver walked out of Atlanta Police Headquarters with his attorneys. That's Mr. McIver on the left. He was there to talk with investigators about the death of his wife, Diane McIver. She was the president of U.S. Enterprises, Inc., the parent company for Corey Airport Services, and her photograph is featured on the side of Corey's big smokestack overlooking the downtown connector. This is the police incident report taken early Monday morning. The report states that Mrs. McIver was riding in the front passenger seat of a white Ford Expedition Sunday night when the shooting happened. The people in that SUV told police that the shooting happened here on Piedmont. And of course, one of the things investigators could use are security cameras. There are a lot in this area. Multiple sources tell Channel 2 Action News that Tex McIver was one of the people in the SUV, though police are not saying just who was in the vehicle, and they have not named anyone as a suspect or even said if there was an actual crime. The Fulton County Medical Examiner's office confirms that Mrs. McIver was riding in the front passenger seat and was shot in the back. They are listing her death as a homicide. But a homicide does not necessarily mean murder, only that they believe her death may have been caused by another person, and that can include accident.
Tex McIver told police that a gun accidentally went off and killed his wife Diane as the couple and a friend drove near Piedmont Park in Atlanta.
Well, now, for the very first time, we're hearing from that friend who was driving the car at the time of the shooting.
Let me be completely candid with our viewers. You are going to see this family friend for the first time, but she did not grant a reporter interview. This is a private video. However, in a conversation with her attorney, we do gain a new perspective. The other occupant of the car, the driver, is Dani Jo Carter. She's the family friend who spent the day and evening with Tex and Diane McIver. On the night, the husband says a pistol he had in the back seat went off accidentally, with a single bullet penetrating the passenger seat where Diane was sitting. Attorney Charles Lee Davis, a friend, had Dani Jo videotape what he calls snippets to satisfy media requests to talk to his friend. Turns out, however, that in this privately done video, she gives almost no detail as to her account of what happened.
I gave a very extensive, detailed report that was videoed and audioed downtown. I was down there for about 4 hours, and I'm cooperating with them, doing what they asked me to do.
Dani Jo said more to Davis with no camera rolling, and I asked him the questions that have been moving on social media about the incident. Item, was there any erratic motion in the family SUV that could have led to McIver being jerked and mishandling the weapon?
And they were sitting at a stoplight when the gunshot happened. And Dani Jo...
The vehicle was still, as best her recollection?
Correct.
It wasn't coming to a stop, it was standing at a stoplight.
That's her recollection, yes.
McIver's attorney has stated his client was asleep in the back seat and doesn't actually know how the gun went off.
Did she ever mention anything to you about anyone thinking to call 911?
She didn't ever mention anything like that. I think because they felt like they were close enough that they could get her there quicker than an ambulance could get there.
Does Dani Jo feel 100% that this was an accident?
She's very confident that it was an accident. She does now. Having said that, she was looking out the front windshield when it happened. She doesn't know what happened in the back seat.
Now, I've had a chance to talk extensively with the attorney for Mr. McIver and from Mr. McIver himself. And over time, the story has developed a little bit, you might say evolved, in terms of those moments right as the gun went off. At one point early on in the conversation, they talked about him hitting a bump or something. But later on, the attorney did tell me he was asleep and really doesn't know how that gun went off.
Dani Jo Carter says she was stopped at a traffic light along Piedmont Avenue when the shooting happened. She is absolutely devastated by the loss of her best friend and still too emotional to talk about it at length on camera, but she did record a statement through her attorney.
She's having a really tough time. I mean, this was her best friend of 40 years.
Her attorney confirms most of what Tex McIver says happened. He was asleep when they hit traffic on the connector and awoke to find they'd exited the highway downtown. McIver was uncomfortable with the neighborhood they were in.
I believe that Diane knew the area somewhat well because she came through there sometimes to get to Corey. So I don't think Dani Jo was all that concerned about it.
But Tex asked for his gun from the center console. Diane handed it to him inside a plastic grocery bag, and they continued north on Piedmont Avenue. In an interview with a polygraph expert, Tex McIver said, quote, the vehicle hit a bump and the gun unexpectedly discharged. That's where Dani Jo's story differs.
It was at a stoplight. There wasn't any bump because they were sitting still.
She says she thought something had hit the car until Diane said she'd been shot by her husband. Instead of waiting on 911 and an ambulance, Dani Jo started driving to Emory Hospital. Does she think this was an accident?
I don't know that she knows. She was looking out the front window.
McIver now says he fell back asleep and doesn't know how the gun went off. He has not been charged.
I do not think that she thinks it's murder. I mean, Tex was one of her friends, too. I think it would be very hard for her to accept the idea that it was anything other than an accident.
And Dani Jo's attorney says the women were sitting up front and talking, and so he stressed that Dani Jo really doesn't know what happened in that back seat since she was watching the road at the time.
We learned late last night that Atlanta police were swearing out a warrant against CLAUD Tex McIver. We worked overnight into the morning to be able to confirm it. APD is charging Tex McIver with a felony count of involuntary manslaughter and a misdemeanor count of reckless conduct. McIver has admitted to the shooting, but claims it was just a terrible, terrible accident. He says he was worried that they were going to be carjacked that night, actually had a pistol in his lap in the back seat of that SUV. The warrant states that McIver caused the death of his wife due to the careless and reckless manner in which he was handling that gun.
He avoided being seen as he entered the Fulton County jail Wednesday night, but authorities released this mugshot of attorney CLAUD Tex McIver minutes after he was booked.
The unlawful act as it was charged in this case was shooting his wife by pulling the trigger of the gun.
According to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, arrangements were made with the U.S. Marshals Service for the Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force to coordinate McIver's surrender. Sources tell us that he had until 8 o'clock to turn himself in and was booked by 8:19 Wednesday night. Originally, a spokesperson for McIver said the attorney took out his .38 caliber pistol because they were afraid of a Black Lives Matter protest.
A judge granted bond today to an Atlanta attorney charged with the shooting death of his wife. At this hour, he's still inside the Fulton County jail.
After looking at financial documents, the state believes Tex McIver is worth about $3 million, so it considered him a potential flight risk. That's why they wanted that $1 million bond, but the judge set it much lower. McIver's attorney says he is a broken man.
Try to put yourselves in that position of somebody. Assume that you truly love somebody and that you'd spent your whole life with them, and they were the most important person in your life, and then their death occurred under these types of circumstances. How would you feel? How would you, when you get up out of bed every day, how do you feel? Well, that's how he feels.
I think that the unnecessary death of any person in Fulton County is a big case for the Fulton County DA's office, and certainly Mr. Howard has, through his career, treated each death as a very, very important case.
The judge set bond at $200,000. McIver's attorney says his client is trying to cope with his loss.
It's been horrible. It's been horrible for him. and he's doing the best he can to deal with it.
Morris, a judge says he can remove his ankle monitor. Is that right?
Yes, that's true, giving Tex McIver more mobility to, they say, do the work he has to do, which is in some cases across the country. The ankle monitor, one of 3 issues addressed today by a judge who heard both sides make the argument. The attorney for Tex McIver argues his client isn't going to run from justice and should have his bond modified. While McIver is free on $200,000 bond, the lawyer asked the judge to remove an ankle monitor. The prosecution argued against that.
We would oppose the ankle monitor being taken off. It allows the state to keep track of Mr. McIver. It's not in dispute. He shot and killed Diane McIver. That's not the issue.
So the reason you are asking for the ankle monitor is because Mr. McIver comes from a background of affluence and resources.
Yes, and can flee and simply walk over the border at any time. He goes to Texas, he can cut that ankle monitor off. The minute he does, we'd like to know that if he's going to make a run for it across the border.
Now, they argue for McIver, the attorney for McIver argued that he's got some clients, he's a lawyer out of state, and it's just too difficult trying to get on a plane with TSA and the ankle monitor would go off. So she removed that. Other restrictions modified. The prosecution had said that he should not be allowed to talk to people who work for Diane McIver's former employer, that is Corey Advertising. The judge removed that, as well as gave him some other concessions.
A Fulton County judge says a man who shot and killed his wife can sell her expensive belongings at auction.
These are some of the items that are making the latest headlines in the curious death of a prominent Atlantan. The jewelry, purses, and other assets of deceased corporate executive Diane McIver are set for auction in less than 18 hours.
If a defendant is allowed access to the proceeds of either the benefits of the will and or the benefits of the insurance policy, they can conceivably deplete all of those assets. And if a disposition is then entered where Mr. McIver, for instance, was found guilty of murder or felony murder or voluntary manslaughter under the Slayer statute, all of those proceeds would have to be returned to Mrs. McIver's estate. And if he's not, all of those proceeds would then be his.
Attorney William Hill challenged whether it was even necessary to hold this hearing. Tex McIver, who says the sale is intended to award 4 of Diane's friends with settlements called for in the will, he says he would have been willing to first place all the proceeds in probate court. Now, it is the probate court that Judge Constance Russell says should have handled the matter altogether. And she says to the prosecution, that's where it should go. She denied the motion.
Today, just one day after McIver was sent back to jail for violating his bond on the previous charge, a grand jury upgraded the charges to malice murder. Fox 5's Morris Diggs has followed every twist in this case and joins us now live. Morris, these new charges mean McIver will stay in jail for now.
Yes, at least for a few days until we get a new hearing on the new charges. Now, Atlanta police detectives looked at this and they came back with 1 felony count of involuntary manslaughter and a misdemeanor count of reckless conduct. But the district attorney, Paul Howard, believed there was more there. And after months of investigating, he came back with the grand jury announcement of a murder charge as well as interfering with witnesses. When deputies placed handcuffs on Tex McIver Wednesday afternoon, his lawyers thought he'd only have to spend a few hours in jail for violating his bond. But the lead prosecutor knew at that time more would be coming.
I think everybody in this room knows that pretty much taking pleas on murder cases, that's not what I do. He is charged by the Atlanta Police Department with involuntary manslaughter. That has absolutely nothing to do with the Fulton County DA's office is going to do.
And murder, not involuntary manslaughter, is what came down from a Fulton County grand jury in the much talked about death of Diane McIver.
Your guns don't just go off. You got to pull the trigger.
How do you get from an accidental shooting to murder? This filing by the DA to probate court may shed light on the question. Investigators contend Ms. McIver had an updated or amended will indicating they believe a murder motive has to do with the wife's wealth. There's been property from the Buckhead socialite that's already been on the auction block.
There's no second will. He's not going to find a second will. There's no financial motive. There's no jealousy.
Now, lawyers on each side have accused the other of gamesmanship. Okay, so what about the timing of this indictment? Well, it could be something as simple as the fact that the grand jury's time for sitting in Fulton County was about to be up. And DA Paul Howard didn't want to start all over again with a brand new grand jury. So that indictment came down today. It is not a surprise because the investigators have been at the Buckhead condo where the couple lived, searching through the safes, looking for financial documents.
During today's bond hearing, the district attorney had harsh words about McIver. Fox 5's Morris Diggs was at that hearing today. And Morris, the DA described McIver as arrogant and said that he was trying to obstruct justice and prevent himself from going to jail.
Well, you know, you've got to figure that an experienced inmate knows not to say anything over a jail phone that might come back to bite you. Well, the assistant DA, Clint Rucker, says authorities monitored McIver's phone calls. And what he reportedly said has stymied the defense efforts to get him released on bond today.
You understand the charges that have been brought against you, Mr. McIver?
I do. Looking like he'd been in jail for a while, Buckhead attorney and murder defendant Tex McIver hoped to be granted a bond during this court session. But the prosecution, which is trying McIver for the admitted shooting of wife Diane, used the defendant's own recorded words from jail phone calls to bolster his contention the inmate should not get bond. Clint Rucker said as recently as this past weekend, McIver was trying to subvert justice. He's reportedly heard on a call telling his sister to contact a man named James Hugh who worked for the McIvers as a handyman.
To reach out to Mr. Hugh to provide him with a car, a Jaguar, that belonged to Diane McIver.
And the prosecution added,
Mr. Hugh is like a little bird, and you have to feed him things from time to time to get him to kind of do what you want him to do. And so that was very, very disturbing to hear.
The prosecutor then turned to another recorded call to a friend, a judge. He says McIver used coded language in speaking to Judge Craig Schwall.
I need you to contact him because all he has to do is make a phone call, and then I can be out of here the next day. It's the appearance that through Mr. McIver's influence that he is able to affect the system. He is able to kind of manipulate what I think is the fair administration of justice.
The defense countered saying Rucker had pulled a submarine job by not disclosing that he had these calls. He also accused the prosecutor of being sanctimonious.
It's not what he thinks that constitutes obstruction of justice. It's what he does. Now, Mr. Rucker has got my client confined for 42 days out in Fulton County Jail, and he's gone through all those phone calls, and he's found 3 calls, and he's aligned them in his greatest hits.
Now, Judge McBurney, realizing that he had cameras in the courtroom, wanted to make it clear that Judge Schwall has never contacted him at all, seeking to influence him regarding anything involving the McIver case.
If you get a chance, would you call James and just check on him, tell him I'm thinking about him and his bad back?
Yeah, I will.
He's a guy, you know, if he's like a bird. If he's not looking for food and eating every day, it's not good. And here's a guy with a bad back that has to work every single day to keep things going.
Bless him. He's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
So I will call him.
The will fix some of that too, but still.
Yeah.
His phone number is 404.
Wait a minute. Okay. I think I have it. But all
right.
Okay.
And I promised to sell him Diane's black car. That's all I want to say. And just tell him they're trying to clear the title now. There's a title issue on Diane's black car that's stored at Corey.
Okay.
There's a title issue, and as soon as Richard gets that cleaned up, we'll be ready to go.
All right. I thought Richard doesn't work there anymore, but he's working on it.
Well, you know, that's an excellent point. No, he doesn't work there anymore, but the car is owned by DRS, that corporation.
Oh.
Diane
Okay.
and Richard had together.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
okay.
But anyway, Kirk brought that news to me a couple of days ago. I forgot to mention it, but what's important here is that James know I'm keeping my promise to him. He's gonna use that car for income generation.
Okay.
And I promised him I'd do it, and I don't even think I've forgotten about it.
Okay. Is it in your hands to do it? Because I know everything's changed.
All the documents are signed and approved. So it's just a matter of whoever's running DRS is supposed to give me a clear title and the car, and then it goes to James. And these are recorded calls, so I don't want to use any names, but could you call the father of my godson and indicate that it appears the other side is dragging their feet, which is going to result in my staying here much longer, which is consistent with everything they've done. And if there's anything he knows to do, he'll understand that. But if there's anything he can do, we appreciate it. All we need is the signature of somebody, and that will get the process going over here, and I'm out.
Okay. Absolutely. I will do that right now.
And when you're talking to Hoos, ask him who is the new state party chair.
Okay. I'll ask him.
I had a meeting last weekend. I had a horse in the race.
Okay. No, I'll see. But I may not talk to him till tomorrow. Is that okay?
Fine, yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to talk to the judge at all?
What? Yes, if you don't mind, for just a second.
Hang on, I'll let him hear you.
All right.
Hey, Dee Dee.
I'm right here, Austin. Can you see me?
I miss you a lot.
Well, I miss you. How you doing, Judge?
Hang in there. You got a hearing on the 6th and the 8th.
They tell me the one. Yeah, they tell me the one on the 8th has been postponed because nobody's in town. But
probate hearing. But you want to make sure it's not the next week. That's when the boys will be gone with him to Europe.
Yeah.
I wanted the bond hearing you're going to have on the 6th.
Yes, sir.
But I support you 1,000%. Okay.
I know you are. I can use it. I'm ready to come home, sir. I'm ready.
Hang in there. We care. Okay?
I will. Thanks for coming, Judge. That means a lot.
I'm going to let you talk to Austin.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Days before prominent attorney Tex McIver faces murder charges in the death of his wife, attorneys are still battling over what evidence the jury will see.
This is not going to be a quick trial, with the prosecution telling the judge they expect the case to last at least a month, and they plan to call 97 witnesses. The prosecution and the defense argued about everything from the existence of a second will to how much media exposure this case has gotten. Through the hours-long hearing, we only heard from Tex McIver once when the judge asked him how he was doing. Jury selection in the case is scheduled to start Monday morning.